Good question. So what I can tell you is what I'm finding, obviously teaching at Champions, many of these students, I'd say maybe as much as 30 or 40% of them are crossing over from being realtors, agents, brokers, things like that. Yeah, there's a pretty healthy, one class I was teaching, it was maybe 12 students, and I think four of them were agents and brokers, moving over, adding appraising as part of their profession. And I asked kind of why, and of course, I mean, some of them are saying, well, this commission thing is kind of spooking me,
Uh-huh.
which makes sense, right? I mean, gosh, that's a bit of a shocker to all of a sudden have the whole commission structure reconfigured there,
Yeah.
so but anyway, one of the things that I would say from that perspective is that many of them are quite pleased to know that you can, utilize and deploy this professional skill and credential in so many different ways, outside of just what they thought, so and then they have the ability once they're licensed,
Mhm.
there's different levels of licensing, just like you have agents and then you've got brokers, we have, everything from trainee all the way up to certified general. And so once they know that, well, once I'm licensed, technically I don't have to work for anybody, you know. Obviously that's, different than being certified, because
Right.
being certified means that not only can you work independently, but you can actually have trainees that work for you. So it's kind of similar, I guess, if you were going to do an equivalency to like being a broker, being certified. But even at the license level, though, you don't have to have anyone sign off on your work. So it gives you that level of independence and autonomy to go out there and hang your shingle and hold yourself out to the market and build a practice for yourself. So that's usually pretty exciting for most people to know.
Wow. I see we have
Yeah.
a question. Yegi,
All
go ahead
right, all
and
right.
mute. Yegi.
Hi, hi. Thank you for having this program and thank you for letting me to enjoy. If I were, hi, my name is Ziegi. I'm a real estate agent in Orange County and working with Together Realty. And I was thinking for many years, 10 years, want to get my appraiser license, but there's so many courses, there's so many, I don't know which one you're suggesting and how long takes, and there's an internship. It's like a medical school. But anyway, could you a little bit help me about that, or is it not include this program?
No, it's a good question, and I can kind of touch on it briefly, Yegi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Um, so becoming an appraiser, it's very structured in the way that it's done, and every state has their own, I would say, requirements, but they all pretty much mirror each other, though they're not dramatically different. The only difference might be is who's approved to teach in which state, because each education provider has to get approved, across every state that they want to, provide education in. So, in terms of that, I would suggest that, you kind of go onto your state licensing board's website to see who are your education providers that are approved in California, because I don't know all of them at all. I know a few that are, national that I could suggest just briefly. For example, like the Appraisal Institute, they're licensed in all of the states to teach appraisal education. McKissick is one that's more of a specific real estate, education provider. They do other things than just appraising. They also offer realtor and inspection, and I think mortgages as well. And I think they're licensed across the board too. And then you can even, do these at the collegiate level. I did. And so there's also going to be, most likely when you log on to your state board's website, there'll be some universities and colleges that'll also offer these courses as well. So those are the ones that I would suggest just kind of off the top of my head, but also look and see who's your provider. And then the other thing is, once you've gotten your education requirements met, it is going to be required that you get training, because you have to have, in most states, it's 1,000 hours of experience minimum with a certified appraiser. And that tends to be I would say, the roadblock that folks tend to run into, because it's not the easiest part of the process. In fact, it's the most challenging. But if you can identify someone that's looking to train you, then you'd be off to the races and down your path towards becoming an appraiser. But I encourage you to do it, because I think it's a very rewarding profession. I think realtors make great appraisers, quite frankly. That's one of those other things that I think a lot of people don't know. I really do. You know, I'm an advocate for that. Not every one of them know. Not all,
I was just
not
about
all
to
real
say.
estate. Not all. You know, let me qualify that. But
Some of
I would
y'all do
say
not need to apply. Just kidding.
nah, not all. But I can say that I've met so many people who are realtors that to me, it would just be a great transition for them or a great, compliment to what they already do. And I would just tell them, look, I mean, what are you waiting for? Because it's not like you're learning how to do plumbing or something like that. It's not, crossing over to something so foreign to you. You already know the terminology, you're already involved with the profession on a day-to-day basis. Some of the courses that you've already taken, you're going to see some of this stuff overlap into what you're going to be doing on like, for example, if you know what a legal description is and you know how to identify a property based on that, it's the same way we would do it as appraisers.
Yeah.
And that's just one example, so there's certain terminology that's just universally part of our lexicon as real estate professionals that we all know,
Right.
so that doesn't change. So yeah, I always try to tell people if it's something that you've been thinking about doing, I would say take the plunge, go for it.
They'll probably tell me don't add anything else to what you're already doing, but I might do it because Kevin just said to do it. So question, kind of along the lines of what Ilya was asking. I know Julie and I were kind of texting back and forth about this. When it comes to working with our clients, as real estate professionals and brokers, we try different strategies to pull together our comparative market analysis or CMAs. And it's extremely subjective because we don't know exactly which properties an appraiser is going to pull. We can use our best guesstimate. And so for us, when we're preparing, how do we best prepare? I like, for instance, I prepare an appraisal report. I like to be over prepared and not make the assumption that the appraiser doesn't want to see it. Let them tell me, no, I can't look at it, right? So how do we talk to that agent to say, because I think you mentioned at some point that person is in charge of themselves. They're responsible for themselves. There's no gatekeeper, so to speak. So knowing that, what goes through the mind of an appraiser when you get that property and you're headed out to an appraiser? Are you first going into MLS? Are you reaching out and asking, hey, are there any updates on the property that we should be prepared to do? What does that process look like as we're trying to help our sellers navigate through that?
Well, I would say that for one, the way that each appraiser approaches their, I would say his assignment that he's been given from his client is going to be a little different.
Right.
But one thing I would say as it relates specifically to your question, for example, oftentimes you guys are the point of contact, right? And so particularly if it's, you're the listing or you're selling agent, whatever, so if you get the appraiser to contact you, if that's something that's part of what we're given, because we're giving what's called a letter of engagement. That's what we get to start off and saying, hey, you have been, hired, if you want to say, to do this appraisal, and on that letter of engagement, it's going to have different people's numbers on there that are the point of contacts. Maybe it's just one number, maybe it's several people, and so if one of them is the realtor and they call you, that is your opportunity to not, because he's calling you to get the appointment set, of course.
Right.
He's not calling you to talk about the weather and how the Astros did last night. So, so once you guys kind of establish, okay, the property's vacant, it's occupied, it's available on Tuesday at 12 o'clock, once you kind of get those things kind of hammered out, you can say, hey, listen, I'd like to send you over a list of all of the improvements that have been done on the property. Is that okay? He's going to say, oh, great, thank you. So that's kind of the time during that contact, that engagement with them, you can kind of address all of that stuff. You can say, also, because you're going to collect his email address if you don't already have it. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. I have a few clients where once they, engage me to do an appraisal, they will hit everybody in the process and let them know that I'm involved so that they can kind of expect to be contacted. But not all of them do that. So anyway, you can get that email address from, him or her at that time, and then you can kind of just send them everything that you'd like them to look at. And again, no guarantees that they will, but at least you can have that in front of them so that, it kind of gives them a chance to say, well, this is a realtor who's very much engaged in the process. You guys be surprised at how many realtors literally are uncooperative with us. You would never believe it, never believe it. You would think they'd be like, just, oh my God, thank you. We need to get this deal closed, right?
Right. And that's what we're trying to figure out is how did we get to a place where the appraiser became this secret enemy that,
this
we could
adversarial
go,
thing.
yeah, like I don't know how we got there, Julie.
I don't know.
But I
Julie's
speak
got
to
an
that a
answer.
little bit,
Yes.
that adversarial. First question about that. Do you think it became more adversarial between agents and appraisers with the, I guess, formation of the AMC and the whole distance between an entity being able to choose their appraiser as a result of the Dodd-Frank Act, or do you think it's always been adversarial?
Always.
Always?
that didn't have any, particularly dramatic impact on something. I think structurally it was that way already. All the Dodd-Frank Act did was basically just kind of codify the, I guess, need for entities to kind of be separated more distinctly. And the entities particularly that we're talking about is the lender and the appraiser. For example, and that didn't stick, by the way, Julie, it didn't. That was such a joke. So what had happened, just give everyone context that's on here so y'all know what we're talking about, is that when we had the great mortgage crisis, 2008, 2009, prior to that, AMCs did exist. And an AMC is an appraisal management company. And all that is kind of like the middleman between the appraiser and the lender, so it's like a person in the middle or an entity in the middle. Kind of think about how your HMO is in between you and your doctor. It's like that, which of course we tend to not even like those people. You'd rather just talk to your doctor and not have to go through 5 people to set up an appointment for your, whatever. So anyway, they already existed, but they only had a small portion of the market. Most of us appraisers had our own clients where we could just, have a relationship with the banks that we dealt with on a routine basis. And, let's say Joe Blow at, this bank wanted to order an appraisal, they just send you an email or call you up or fax you or whatever, and they just order it, Well, they felt like after the housing market collapsed, during 2008, 2009, that the problem was there was all this, coercion and kind of manipulation that was taking place between lenders and appraisers and that type of thing. And was there some of that? Of course, but was that the reason why that happened? No. And so by them kind of having a knee jerk, they decided, well, we're going to put a middleman in between this for good. Like this is going to be how it's going to be ordered for good. And so it didn't stay that way because now all the banks are kind of going back to the model where they can engage appraisers directly because they didn't like that model the other way around, But in terms of, kind of that adversarial thing with, realtors and appraisers, I think if you want me to give you my little, back of the napkin, opinion about that, I think it has to do with the times that, because we're loved and hated, right? When your deal makes the contract price based on, y'all love us, like, oh my God, you're the best appraiser I've ever met, But when it doesn't, it's like you're the stupidest appraiser. I mean, where'd you get your appraisal license? Out of a gumball machine, So that's what it comes down to, if you ask me. It's like whether or not you guys can close on that deal is how you feel about an appraiser that day,
Wow.
And so they kind of lead in with this kind of reticence, and kind of side eye, I think, is based on maybe a past bad experience when it didn't work out.
And I'm not cutting in front of you, Ela, but it's just, the appraiser that came to my property earlier today, I didn't find out his name until this morning, so I didn't have a time to review and to do some research. And he had all 1-star reviews. And I was like, wow, okay.
Where do you look that up at? I don't even know.
Googled him. I Googled him and found his.
Okay.
But it occurred to me that people probably don't review appraisers when they have a positive experience. So it's skewed negative. How do you suggest people handle these reviews? Because when you don't get the valuation you want, then you're motivated to create that review. But if you do, then people forget for the most part you're even part of the process.
Yeah.
So how do
Well,
you handle it?
I'll say one thing, I didn't even really know there was like a review kind of thing out there. God knows what is mine. I'm afraid to know. Um,
Well, the fact that you don't know it's there means it's good.
okay, yeah. I've never had anybody tell me, Kevin, I reviewed you and I looked you up, whatever, you know. So yeah, this is the other thing about being an appraiser is that now I guess my question to you, Julie, is like, was this like a part of a transaction of some kind? What was the need for the appraisal in the first place?
Yes, so I guess I'm in the unique position that I deal with a lot of appraisers that
Mm-hmm.
are not MLS type transactions. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're getting off-market valuations. I feel that appraisers between there have been very collaborative, in that. So this is another off-market transaction that I need a valuation for. And I'm going in with an open mind, and the lender's going in, and we'll just see. I'm not like, oh, it has to hit this point. I really am interested in this person's true opinion.
True opinion,
And I
yeah.
did submit, I submitted my CMA, and since I know that area very well, I also gave blurbs about the particular properties because
Mm-hmm.
I've been inside of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave him my criteria. This is how I did it. And I was able to answer a lot of questions about the property on site. I think back to what you said about communication, if you have that information handy and can easily get it to your appraiser, I would say that would enhance the process and make it infinitely less adversarial than if you're not able to communicate that well with the appraiser, and then you view them as an obstacle to get past rather than a partner with whom to collaborate.
That's good. And there is a system out there. I'm sorry, Kevin,
Go
because
ahead.
I'll forget. There's a system out there. It's called Cloud CMA. So if you have access to Cloud CMA, they actually have a button that you can hit and say, create an appraiser report for me, that will put everything in a report that an appraiser would look for. And then you can just go ahead and send that over and say, hey, thank you so much for scheduling the time. Here is the report. Kevin?
Hey, that's great news right there. For all y'all that are listening, see, that's the teacher in Shelyna coming out right there. I've never heard of that, but obviously I don't do CMAs. But yeah, that seems like a great tool for
Mhm.
someone to kind of make it a little bit easier for themselves.
Yeah. And so we did have this question Ilya put in there, and I was going to ask the same thing. So we just talked about, people get upset when it doesn't appraise. And what I tell people all the time, it did appraise. It might not have met the number that you wanted, but it appraised. There was an appraisal done.
There was an appraisal.
So, exactly. So when you come up against someone who is upset about the number and the outcome, what is the process that you would recommend to go back and not necessarily dispute it, but have that conversation to say, hey, how did you come up with that? Because this is where I landed. And I think that's where a lot of that trepidation comes in about the whole me against you, because I don't know how to go back and have the discussion, is where I'm seeing agents fall off. They don't know how to go back and have that conversation with you.
That's a very relevant question that's actually now being kind of formalized, the process, at least in terms of what you're referring to, by Fannie Mae. They just sent out a circular like maybe 2 or 3 days ago. They're literally about to formalize, and it's called a value reconsideration, ROV, or VOR, but most people call it a reconsideration of value, ROV.
Yeah.
And so there's an actual process for that. The only thing is, it was kind of different for each lender in terms of how they would go about doing it, but it's always been there, or at least it's been there for many years. And so to your question, what we're most likely talking about is, well, this can happen in any context, but what you see it in as it relates to realtors is most likely in a purchase style transaction,
Right.
But this same process also impacts people who are doing a refinance and they're displeased with or disagree with the value in the appraisal. The process does not change no matter what in terms of that. But so yeah, there's a process in place, and your borrower or buyer in this case is the one that's going to have to initiate that, because they're the ones that is on the lender side getting this mortgage. Now, most of the time, just between us on this call, it's the realtor who's managing that process for them. So not the borrower at all, you know. So it's going to be a realtor that's going to be feeding them comps and what have you. So just to kind of go back to it. So what I would say is that, you know, as realtor, you definitely go ahead and just get with, you know, the borrower and say, hey, you know, guess what? The value didn't, you know, come in at our contract price. I would like to go ahead and, you know, initiate or let's, you know, initiate the recertification of value. The borrower is going to get that form. It's a form that they have, and they'll get that from the lender. And then the lender will expect, you know, you guys to fill that out. And then that's probably when you're going to sit down with them and go through that thing with them. And on the form, it basically asks, well, you know, what was it about the appraisal that you didn't, you know, agree with? And again, each company has a different one, but it's going to look something like that. And you can say, well, I didn't think that they chose the best comparables. That's a safe way of saying it. You know, don't say that I don't like it because it didn't make my contract price.
Right.
That's like, come on.
That's usually what happens.
That's what it is, but we're not kidding ourselves. We know that's why this is happening, you know. And then at that point, there's going to be a line or a block in there where you can put some sales or comps. Some of them even have a grid where you can fill it out kind of in a CMA style or an appraisal style where you can even make adjustments, you know. But many of them will just have a block where you can put in 3 sales or 4 sales or whatever. They need to be closed sales. Don't give them listings because that's not going to have more weight than closed sales. And so go ahead and whatever you guys use to kind of arrive at that value on that CMA, if they're not on the appraisal, then that would be a great time to add that data in there and then send that back to the bank, to the lender, and then it's going to make its way back to the appraiser, and then we'll, you know, analyze it. And if it's got merit, we'll consider that and maybe make some changes. If it doesn't, we're either way it goes, you got to address it though. You don't get to just like ball it up and throw it away. You have to address it within a certain amount of time. And so I can tell you that there's times where I have to go ahead and pivot and make a change on an appraisal. That happened a bunch though. I'm pretty good at what I do. But am I 100 out of 100? No. So that being said, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of a sale just not being put into MLS correctly. You know, I'm sure you guys have seen that where, you know, it's like, well, why is this one not coming up, but it's in the same subdivision? Well, it's because, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Realtor typed in the subdivision name wrong. Therefore, if we searched it by subdivision name, we're not going to find it if you spelled it wrong.
And then we blame you.
For not using it, right? Yeah.
I'd like to, can I just, the whole subdivision wrong thing and finding the comps for this property for which I met with the appraiser today, it was, somebody must have put in the legal description wrong or messed it up because it didn't come up by subdivision. So I did a map first and then picked all the ones, not only in that subdivision, but a phase. So I'm not, you know, crossing phases. But I would like to ask the question of what are ways that agents can refine their BPOs? Are there some guidelines you have for that?
Right. You know, if you're talking about a home that's in your general master plan community, standard subdivision, this is not hard to do at all. The problem comes in is when you're dealing with these outlier properties where it isn't in one of those type of communities. You know, it's, let's say it's, you know, more on the further, you know, limits of a community where it's maybe sitting on a couple of acres or something, you know, and it's custom built by the owners or something like that. That's not going to probably come out like you would expect because the process is not going to be quite so obvious, you know, as far as comp selection. And so you have to kind of start, we call it the appraisal problem in our industry, you know, so when you're defining what the appraisal problem is for us, it's like, well, what kind of property is the subject that we're appraising? If it's your standard kind of, you know, Perry homes that, you know, they build in every community and there's 50 sales in the last 12 months in that subdivision, we're not going to have a problem finding comps, you know, and most of the time you can usually agree, you know. Now, here's where some of the nuances can come in, even in those situations where it's in an area where it's a data-rich environment. Condition is one of the biggest problems that we disagree on in terms of us as real estate professionals, and you guys probably see this all the time. Let's say you got an appointment to list a property with a homeowner, they're gonna swear to God their house is the best home that's ever been built in mankind's history, right? There's never been a better house than theirs. Therefore, they should get top dollar, and then you walk through there with them and stuff, and you're like, well, y'all have Formica countertops. You got, vinyl laminate floors. You haven't updated this house since it was built in 1985. But you want me to list this above everything that's ever sold in this neighborhood. But that's how they are, right? Because on residential, it's a very personal thing. It's an emotional thing, right? With homeowners. So that is the issue. I find more so than anything else is that it won't be so much that we disagree about the size of the house, the age of the house, where the house is located, does it have a pool or not? Those things are facts that can be easily understood.
Right.
They get into the nuances oftentimes because they think that they have made updates to their house and we haven't acknowledged them correctly, right, Julie? And then that's a whole nother conversation. Well, did you really update it? Because the house had a hole in the roof, but you put a new roof on. Was that really an update?
Right.
Not really. Everybody's got a roof and we would hope that the roof doesn't leak. Updates are like, oh, I tore out the kitchen and remodeled it. I put custom cabinets in. I went back with some quartz countertops. We've got, high-end appliances, things like that. Those are updates, but that's the kind of stuff that, homeowners oftentimes will pretend as if they don't understand. They're not crazy. They know this stuff because when they get ready to buy, they're on the other side of it and they're extra particular, right? Their level of scrutiny is like none other when they're buying, but when they're selling, they think they're going to fool everybody, like, come on, give me a break. No one's crazy, So that's the kind of stuff that, matters, that can be a bit of a point of contention sometimes on an appraisal because we have to appraise properties based on the condition and we have to rate the condition and the construction quality. And we're expected to compare it to like properties, and when we don't have those, then we adjust accordingly, So I get handed a pack of stuff at a property where they've got nothing but fully remodeled homes and theirs hasn't been looked at since they bought it. And that's the ones they want us to use. And I'm like, come on.
And that's funny you say that because I'm always teaching people a house is going to sell based on three things: price, location, condition. I'm not going to move the house. We can play around with pricing and condition. You're in total control of that. So if you want to affect the price that your home is going to sell for and the time it's going to take, if we can make an impact on condition, that's your job to come in and do that. And so I wanted to pivot really quick. I know you have this designation, the CCIM, which is Certified Commercial Investment Member, which is the expert level for commercial and investing. So we might have some people who purchase or help clients buy and sell commercial. How is that appraisal piece different? Juxtaposition to residential. You got this multi-unit here sitting in the middle with, residential surrounding it. How are you as an appraiser coming in looking at that differently?
Yes, well, it's night and day, obviously, compared to residential. There's really not a whole lot, everything from the fee to how long it takes, to the way that the report is presented, it's all different. And so I would say that when it comes to commercial appraising, if a person doesn't do commercial in terms of, maybe as far as an investor or as a realtor or whatever, it may be a bit of a shock to someone's system when they do kind of step into that arena. Because, for example, I bid on a commercial property yesterday. It was an office building. It's like a 1.5-story office building, single use. It's like a laser eye center is in there, and it's over like on North Wilcrest. And so, matter of fact, a realtor emailed me about it, by the way. That's why I don't know why people don't have, a great relationship with realtors if you're an appraiser, because you guys have been wonderful for me,
We try.
It's been a great relationship because I get work from you guys all the time. So this is a realtor, and so they wanted to know, I guess they're looking to list it for the owner, and they're trying to just get an idea about list price, and so for example, on that one, I quoted a fee of $4,000, that's kind of right around what they should be expecting,
Right.
but I don't know how savvy she is, the lady that emailed me, compared to, your standard residential assignment that might be $500 or $600. That's a pretty big difference, but the amount of work is significantly more, it's a significant, because you're talking about an income producing property, and all of the, things that go along with that in terms of, commercial, valuation, commercial leases. You have to do all of this type of stuff. So that's what I would definitely suggest, to kind of go into it, understanding that the whole entire process can be somewhat different. And it may take, I think I quoted in 14 business days, obviously you can turn a residential property around in, 4 days, 5 days is pretty standard.
Yeah. And then, so I recommend, before anyone listening goes into that commercial realm, partner with someone, I call it your dream team, so to speak. Make sure you have these professionals in your corner that you can talk to, because you're going from residential over into commercial space. So making sure you have that attorney that you can call and ask questions, an appraiser, because even in residential, I've told people before, it does not hurt you to get an appraisal before you list your property. It won't hurt. So having those conversations and making sure you have those partnerships are really important. Julie had a question?
Well, I wanted to sort of speak to the whole commercial aspect of things. My experience in commercial has been one that commercial lending is so very different than residential lending, that the relationship you can have with the appraiser on that side is, in my opinion, very, very, very different. And there's got to be some kind of communication about the income part of the appraisal. So Texas is, for example, a non-disclosure state. And even if it weren't, not all, say, apartment building leases and their terms and their concessions and their amenities are always immediately available unless you have a relationship either with the owner or with the broker that sold it. So I guess having your dream team is great, but maybe just even having a consult beforehand. Like, for example, Kevin, if I wanted to buy an apartment building in Dallas 75216, but I have had properties in 75093, that's a whole different market. There's a whole different way of doing the market survey. What would you, as an appraiser, how would you prepare a client? Like, what is going to be your cost? What are the things you need to look for? What are the big value add things to look for in that property before they even get started? And how would you communicate, maybe, Shelyna, to a potential client? Let's talk to that appraiser, since you don't know anything about this process, how to get started and what to look for before you even get under contract. I hope I haven't meandered too much on that.
No. Yeah, if we're talking about commercial, I think that engaging an appraiser would be a great investment, because we're not talking about, I mean, let's face it, commercial properties are far more expensive, right? I mean, you could be talking, anywhere from, $2 or $3 million to, 20 or 30 or $40 million and up. 100 million, just depends on what it is. I mean, there's no limit. And so, a few $1,000s for an appraisal, you can even get a limited scope one for maybe a little less, it's really a small investment when you think of the overall grand scheme of things in terms of what that might mean to your overall purchase price or your overall sales price, So if you're trying to determine whether or not to list something for $4 million or $8 million, what does $4,000 mean to you? It should be negligible, right? And so that's very critical. And in terms of, like you were saying about, rents and things of that nature, leases, yeah, that's when we do have to have a great dialogue and discussion with the parties, out there, because we're not going to have access to, rent rolls and that, leases and what have you. We have to collect that data from the individuals that are involved. And most of the time they're willing to give it to you, because they know that if you're talking about, commercial property that's income producing, that's what it's being purchased for, or that's what a buyer is considering, is what is the income? What kind of income is this thing throwing off, So that's everything. And so you have to be able to, get someone, be it the buyer, the seller, someone, realtors, property owners, property managers, someone's going to have to say, hey, here's the data that you need. Here's a rent roll. I'll email you an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, so we can at least have that information. And as far as, just kind of being able to make your decision process go a little bit smoother. And so I hope that answers your question, Julie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do
Okay.
most commercial property owners contact an appraiser, a commercially licensed and experienced appraiser before listing, or do they normally just go out there and wing it, in your opinion?
I'd say it's a little bit of both. I get realtors all the time who are looking to list properties and they just don't know. They're like, man, I have no idea where to put this number, or I don't want to, put it somewhere where my seller is being, they're missing, out on money, so they counsel them, to me, which very astutely they should, to say, hey, let's engage someone who can maybe help us make this make sense. But then there's some that do. They think they're probably good enough, and they may be good enough to know that. But I tend to wonder, because obviously there's a lot of factors that come into play. Because, for example, they may be looking at, rents in their marketplace, and they say, well, okay, let's say it's a multifamily. They'll say, oh, well, yeah, they're getting, X amount a month per, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, in this area. Well, but is that a Class A apartment complex, or is that a Class C? Because it matters. So that's what you got to kind of go a little deeper into the thought process when you're trying to figure this stuff out, because the rents are not going to be like rents. You're talking about apples to oranges. And let's say it's some other type of property, if it's an office building, God knows you can get down into the weeds about why that property is worth different than what this other one might be in regards to offices. What was the occupancy on that other property? What type of condition was that one in? What class was that? Were there incentives that these, leases had? How long-term are the leases? All of these factors come into play. So I always tell people, err on the side of, bringing somebody in that knows what they're doing. If I have to go get, open heart surgery, I don't want to be trying to pretend like, oh, well, let me just see if I can figure this out. I want to talk to somebody that knows this, Let me stop goofing around and get somebody that really knows what they're talking about.
Exactly. Well, and to your point, Kevin, there is a resource. I know in Texas, and I'm sure other states do have the same resource. For us, Texas Realtors, we do have what's called Market Viewer, where you can go in and look up a commercial commercial building class A, B, or C, and it will show you what the average sales time is, occupancy, and local rent in the market for those buildings. It would also show you the new construction versus the pre-owned and how those sales are doing as well. And so I know we're wrapping up on time here, and I just had to bring it over to the residential a little bit to ask the question of, let's say Julie was a client of mine who wanted to buy, and Ilya had her house available and Julie wanted to purchase it as an investment property. Does the appraiser look at that single family residential any differently, knowing, well, to that effect, they may not know that it is an investment property, but is there any way you look at it different if you knew that it's being sold and it's being sold as an investment property, never been lived in before, complete rental? Is there anything that is done or should be done differently in that situation?
Yeah, for sure, because most likely, if we're talking about a single family, or even if it's a 2 to 4, but let's just say it's a single family residential that is being used for an investment property and is going to be used in the future that way. Because I mean, we all know nowadays you got whole subdivisions that are being built for rental purposes, so this is a whole asset class that we didn't have 10 years ago. So yeah, what'll happen is we'll do it's called a Form 1007. And it's a Fannie Mae promulgated form that we use to do an analysis, rental analysis on single family properties. And so the appraiser is going to go ahead and fill that form out. He's going to look at rental comps, for that market. And let's say if the subject's a 3-bedroom, well, most likely if he's, doing it correctly, he's going to compare it to other 3-bedroom sales nearby that are similar in features and physical characteristics. And then that way he can determine what market rents would be for this property here. And even if it's currently rented, we're still going to do that form though, because guess what? Oftentimes you'll find that there's some type of a, I would say kind of a disconnect between what the market rent is and what we may come up with in our analysis, And that could be for a variety of reasons. That could be because, let's say, if the market rent is unusually low, it could be because, this has been a tenant that's been there for 10 years, a little old Mrs. Smith that pays on time and she's got 12 cats and, you don't want to raise the rent on her. So you just leave her in there and you don't charge more, Well, if you're an investor like Julie and you're looking to buy and you're like looking at the rental, roll or whatever, and you're like, wait a minute, you're only charging this lady $1,000 for a 3-bedroom in this
She's
neighborhood?
got to go.
I
I
get
was just about to
1,500.
say, Julie's kicking her out.
Yeah, Julie's just ruthless, So no, Julie's not ruthless. Julie's just an entrepreneur. She's a businesswoman. She's doing this for money, and that's what it's about. So that's one thing. And sometimes it could be skewed the other way around, where the rents are much higher than what we've determined in our analysis. And that may be because, Julie's just so savvy that she can talk people into buying, ice in Alaska. She's just slick like that,
That sounds like Julie.
Yeah. So it could be a number of things, and here's one that is very, very important and relevant to what's going on in our lives right now with rental property. There still is a bit of a mismatch, I would say, between what's going on with Airbnb, short-term rentals, etc., and the appraisal profession. What do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, and this happens to me probably once or twice a month, where they're saying, oh, well, Kevin, this home is being Airbnb'd. I'm getting, $300 a month. I mean, a night or something like this. Let's say it's a property that's, able to command that, and they'll send you a list of like a printout that they made themselves, that shows what they've gotten, right? No problem. Well, going back to that 1007 or that 1007 Fannie Mae form that they're going to want us to use, by the way, that form specifically talks about monthly rent, right? It doesn't have anything to do with short-term rental. So to take something that's being Airbnb'd and then try to plug that data into a form that wasn't designed for that, it doesn't work, And so a lot of investors get upset with us because they're like, man, wait a minute, you got this thing at $3,000 a month. I get that in 2 weeks, on this house. How could that even possibly be correct, But what they don't understand is that that form is not designed for Airbnb or short-term rental at all. Now they're trying to figure out a way to kind of remedy that, but so far we haven't gotten something that's just kind of etched in stone just yet.
Yeah.
Can I say something about that form? So since we last were in this meeting, I've had the unpleasant experience of trying to dispute an appraisal valuation and not winning. It was my first loss. I took it badly. And basically it was about the rental comps, in an area where there weren't many rental comps on MLS. And so, I mean, what I did in that situation was just get another appraiser. I left that lender and went to another one and said, hey, how much we control. But where I guess, let me ask you this. When you do an appraisal on an income producing property that is a single family residential, do you account for the fact that the rent achieved is different, especially if there aren't any rental comps? Or do you place more value on the fact that this limited area, and in particular, this was Lamar County, Texas, that didn't used to have rent comps on their MLS, I've got this rent and they're saying that's not sustainable. So exactly what you said, I'm getting rents that are not showing up on MLS because of the properties I'm putting on, but they're dinging me as if I was regular market value in that area, which I didn't think that defeat well. So
let me tell you the answer to this is ultimately going to come down to your lender, because when I tell you, the appraiser is important in that as well. But I've had situations where I've defended scenarios like yours, and I've been able to come up with something that I felt comfortable with, that I could stand behind. But at the end of the day, matching a property with a lender is something people don't know is important. They don't know that. They have no idea. They think every bank, every lender is going to be able to do the exact same stuff, and that's just not the point at all. I'll give you an example. I just appraised one about 2 weeks ago. This is a property that's being built ground up, custom built, you name it. And it's in a market where there's a bunch of other custom homes like that, but people don't tend to ever sell them. They just move in there, they get it built, they own their land, and they live there for a lifetime. And so getting sales data was so, I would say, problematic, but I do this area so much that I know how to appraise it. Well, these people had already been to 2 other banks and couldn't get the deal done. They went to a bank that I'm approved with, and then they hired me to do it, and they're going to be closing in about a week, you know.
Wow.
So I would say it does matter because every lender isn't necessarily comfortable with every type of property. They're
Correct.
just not, you know. So that would be my answer to that, is that it may come down to just, you know, because certain lenders, they have certain familiarity and comfort, you know, they don't feel like it's risky, you know, oh yeah, we do these all day long like that, you know. But then some of them, if it doesn't fit this little tiny little narrow, you know, model, then they get so spooked out, you know. So
Yeah,
that's important.
that's good. And there's some lenders who, to your point, they don't do every loan type. So you'll have some lenders who won't do commercial, won't do land, won't do these different various products because that's not their
Construction loans, yeah,
comfort
stuff like
level.
that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, well, we just want to thank you guys so much. I know we're at time. I love these conversations. I don't know what meds they had me on, but it woke me up for this. So I am excited.
Right.
And I would like to thank Ilya with Radius Room, and I'd like to thank Julie, and thank you, Kevin, for giving up your time. We know you're super busy. We appreciate everyone who's currently watching and all of those who are going to be watching the recording. And so, Ilya, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Shelyna. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for joining us today, and I can't wait for people to watch this back. I think this was one of the more like very valuable conversations that we need to be having in the real estate industry. And so I just want to thank you guys again for your time and for your great questions. I hope everyone has a great rest of the Thursday, and we'll see you guys again soon.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.